For the Monday, February 24th meeting of the Common Council, we'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we'll have the roll call. Ms. Schofield, please.
Alderperson Bear.
Here.
Alderperson Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Doyle.
Here.
Alderperson Manley.
Here.
Alderperson McGilvery.
Here.
Alderperson Reekie. Here. Alderperson Steiner.
Here.
And Alderperson Yours.
Here. We have everyone here. Thank you for that this evening. Next, we have public comment. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak this evening? Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Going to third and final time. Anyone from the public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on then. Next, we have approval of minutes from the February 10th meeting. The minutes were included with your packet. What is your pleasure?
Move approval.
We have a motion by Mr. Yers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Reekie. Were there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the previous meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor of the approval of minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and the minutes are approved. Under Mayor's business this evening, we are going to have our Public Works Director, Ron Reeder, give us an update in just a little bit. When Bill and I were talking about the agenda, I thought it would be appropriate to have Ron come in and just talk a little bit about some of the snow removal we've had, the additional costs. I know we've had a couple situations where there's been frozen laterals in the city, and Ron's going to talk about that. And, you know, Ron, I say it so many times, but you and your department just do the best job, and I hear it all over from people in the city. So we really thank you for the work that you do. But I did want to mention before Ron speaks is one of the things I attended last week. I'm not sure if anyone else from the council did or not, but I was asked to go to the library last week, Tuesday, where they had the inflatable Strolling for Colon display, and it was really interested. And that event was sponsored by Gilda's Club, the UW Carbone Center, and also UW Health. So they had experts in the field all day long talking to people. I think it was open from 9 in the morning until 9 or 9:30 at night, something like that. So it was a good event. I had fun, interesting talking to the people there, and just another good program that we had at our library. So thanks to Brian and others that are responsible for putting that on. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Reeder if he would just give us a little update on activities within the Public Works Department, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just briefly, obviously I think it's very important that you realize that some of the numbers that I'm going to share with you tonight haven't went through the entire audit process, but they're very close estimates. And so I'll just start out by saying on average we budget, and over past experience, that we would go out on a plowing operation or a de-icing operation about 23 times a year. To date, we've been out 38 times. Our staff has worked, excluding last weekend, 11 straight weekends in a row. That has been either on snow removal operations, water main breaks, or frozen water laterals. Consequently, what I call my operating budget for salt, I had budgeted $82,000, and today I'm at about $113,567 for the year 2013, which is a budget deficit of about $31,500. Our motor pool expense, and that includes fuel, maintenance on all of our equipment, tires, or anything that goes along with our plow equipment. I had budgeted $96,000. At the end of the year, I was at $132,626, which works out to a budget deficit of about $37,000. Our overtime budget, we had budgeted for $40,000. At the end of the year, I was at $73,787, which was a budget deficit of $34,000. So all in all, I'm in the hole of about $102,000 for the year 2013. We went through about 1,400 ton of salt. Our salt contract is through the Department of Transportation. We have received all of the salt that was under our contract. We have about 250,000. I wished I had 250,000. We have about 250 ton of salt left in our shed, and we are mixing that with a heavy mixture of sand. I'm not concerned, and I don't want any of our residents to get concerned that I'm going to run out of material, but I'm not going to have much left by the end of the winter. Unfortunately, we try to avoid using sand with our salt just because of the complaints it generates from people tracking it in their garages, what it means to the cleaning procedure of our storm sewers. Obviously, we'll have our street sweepers out just as soon as we get any type of thaw, but we have went through a lot of material. So, unfortunately, I wish I could just say I'm concerned about 2013. I'm projecting from where we are in our budget for 2014, I'm projecting a minimum of $62,000 deficit in the year 2014. We're not going to have any carryover of salt. We are at about $28,000 of our overtime budget, which was budgeted at $40,000, and I'm talking we're getting close to March 1st. So we still have, unfortunately, some winter ahead of us. In 2014, when I was putting together my capital budget, I had projected out that when I looked out in 5 years that our mill and overlay program most likely would go down. With the severe winter we've had and I literally am seeing some streets deteriorate in front of our eyes with the frost depth of about 6 feet of what we're experiencing. Certainly, we're not going to see our mill and overlay program in the future go down. Unfortunately, this is just not a problem with the city of Verona. I'm sure you hear it on the news every night throughout the state. It's been a very, very tough winter on our streets. In regards to our water utility, we average about 7 water main breaks a year. We've experienced 6 to date. We have one piece of water main up on North Main Street that ruptured in late January. It's on North Main. It's a difficult area to fix because of traffic control. I want to make that repair on a Sunday. I was able to isolate that piece of main and serve it in a different direction and not have anybody out of service. So that main we will select a Sunday here in early part of March and make that repair. We're going to have lanes narrowed down to about 9-foot lanes to make this repair, and so we just want to start early on a Sunday morning and get that repair done. I knew that I was going to gain about 73 minutes of daylight in February, and so I opted not to try to fix that in the dark with safety concerns with my people, and do that on a Sunday very early in March. We've had, beginning a week ago Friday, we had our first phone call. It happened to be up in the Scenic Ridge on Acre Court. Of a frozen water lateral. Person didn't have any water. I contacted many companies that thaw out water laterals on that Friday. In general, I had a response that we were released before they could get to us, who was 10 to 14 days out. And most of these people that are in that business do a lot of work for agriculture people. And they were very open with us and said, if any farmers are out of water, they're going to come first. So, Greg Denner, my street superintendent, has a great deal of background in welding. So we contacted every rental place in the city of Madison trying to find a DC welder. We're unable to locate one. So out of desperation, I called J.P. Cullen out at Epic, and Mr. Schumacher said, I really don't know what a DC welder is, but I'm sure we have several of them out here. He said, let me call you back. He called me back in about 10 minutes and said, we got numerous welders out here. Come get it. How long a leads do you want? We'll have it all ready for you. We picked up the welder about 11:30, and we had the people back with water by about 2 o'clock that afternoon. I contacted Mr. Schumacher and said, is it possible we could keep the welder over the weekend? And he said, well, you can keep it till summer, but just don't forget where you got it. So we still have the welder in the back of Greg's truck. We've thawed out 6 laterals to date. We have 8 in my 31 years of work in here. I've only thawed out 1 lateral prior to this year. So we have 8 water customers, the 6 people that we thawed out their laterals. We have them running a small amount of water, and the school, the natatorium, and the K-Wing building, their water temperature was about 34 degrees, and we asked them to turn their water on as well. What we discovered with the school is that just by running a pencil lead of water, their water temperature come up to about 41 degrees. So we have sent out from our rec list and from our newsletter list, we've sent out notifications to people to ask them to check their water. Several people were unable to get thermometers to do that, so we ordered 12 digital thermometers, and we're lending them out to residents that want to use them. We've found there absolutely no consistency whatsoever in our water temperatures. We're finding ranges of 53 degrees down to about 33 degrees. If someone calls and says that their water temperature is at 35 degrees, before we ask them to turn the water on, we set up an appointment for our water department staff to go out and verify that temperature of their water. And so that is sort of a summary. Luckily, from the sanitary sewer standpoint, we haven't had any frozen laterals. We had one piece of 15-inch storm sewer that was plugged solid with ice last week off of Berkeley Street. It took us about 5 hours to break through the ice, but we got that operating again as well. So that's really about all the great news I have for you people tonight. And but certainly I would be more than glad to answer any questions.
Well, Ron, first of all, you talked about being over budget on some issues, and I know department heads, and I know you, over the years, you never want to be over budget. But this is part of the reason that we have a reserve account for the city. I mean, the options are we take care of business and do what the people expect us to do, or we just don't do it, like some other municipalities. And we're not going to do that here. You start letting that snow on the streets and it gets hard packed and you can't get rid of it. We're not going to do that. So I commend you and the staff for doing that. And we have the money, we'll cover it.
Yeah.
So I want to open up if anybody has any questions or comments. Mr. Years?
I just want to really echo the mayor's comments of gratitude. I had the opportunity to ride with a snowplow driver last week, and it was a great experience. I got to see the city through a completely different set of eyes than I ever had before. I'm no longer leaving my trash can out any longer than I absolutely have to. But their dedication to the city is second to none. Public safety officials, and rightly so, get a lot of gratitude for their service and dropping everything from family members. But so do our public works officials. The man I rode with, he said, Christmas is, if the phone rings, you're plowing the streets. And their dedication to the city and to the residents is remarkable. And I don't think you're going to get that many other places. The people plowing out my father's church, Salem, they drove in on a Sunday and said once they hit Verona, they knew it was smooth sailing, and that they don't often see that. And so I just wanted to extend my gratitude to you as well, and to your whole staff. And I sincerely hope that you pass those messages along to your drivers and everybody involved.
Well, and I would like to add, this isn't me. That is my staff. They're phenomenal. So, yeah, thank you.
Other questions or comments? And Ron, we know it's not just you, but we enjoy having you up here because I know how much you enjoy us
Right.
saying good things about you, right, and
Right,
the department.
yeah.
So-
Yeah.
But seriously, we are very, very appreciative of your efforts and the staff. Seeing no questions or comments, Ron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes the mayor's business for this evening. We'll move to the administrator's report. Mr. Burns, please.
Yes, thank you. I have a few updates this evening. First, for the fire and EMS facility design process, we had discussed that at the previous council meeting. We are going to be going ahead with an open house on the schematic design. That open house is going to take place tomorrow, February 25th. From 5 to 7 p.m., and that's going to be at the current fire station at 101 Lincoln Street. That's going to be an open format, so people can stop by anytime during that period and speak with the architect, staff, firefighters, view the plans, and ask questions. We also have information on that project, including the materials that will be at the open house, available on the city website for anyone that's not able to attend the meeting. The city has been continuing to work on the downtown plan that was discussed at the previous Plan Commission meeting. That item will be discussed again at the Plan Commission at the March 3rd meeting. That'll be a 6:30 time start for that meeting. There will be public comment on the meeting and additional time for the Plan Commission to discuss the plan and ask questions. And then that item would also be coming to the City Council following a recommendation from the Plan Commission. Coming up on March 12th, there will be a public informational meeting on the County Highway M reconstruction project, which includes the intersection with County Highway PD. That meeting will take place at 6 p.m. on March 12th at the Verona Senior Center, and the project engineer and staff will be available to provide the latest information on the intersection alternatives and the status of that project and answer questions. And again, we'll be getting information on that up on the city website as we have the final materials for that as well. And then finally, just to report on a couple projects that staff is continuing to work on. We had discussed during the budget process that we'd be looking at some form of compensation survey to provide information on compensation and benefits prior to the 2015 budget process. Several municipalities in the area are looking at doing similar surveys, and the city of Sun Prairie has initiated a conversation to see if there's a way that these municipalities can work together and do a joint survey to share resources and hopefully get some better information. So currently I'm working with staff from Sun Prairie, Middleton, Monona, and McFarland and Stoughton on putting together what this survey could look like. We're trying to define what each community is looking at, their positions, where there's commonality, and we'll be reporting back likely to the Finance and Personnel Committees in the future about the status of that project. And then finally, we are continuing at a staff level to do more research on a potential redesign of the city's website. We're talking with other communities, vendors. We spoke with the resident that had come into public comment and spoke at one of the council meetings. And our intent is to gather that information and research and then bring that item back through the Finance Committee and City Council with a recommendation. And we'd like to do that as soon as possible in the month of March. With that, I'd be available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burns? Not seeing any, Bill. Thank you. Next, then, we will have the engineer's report. Mr. Gunlock, if you would, please.
Thank you. Several items this evening. First is Lincoln Street reconstruction. The Lincoln Street reconstruction and water main replacement project is being advertised for bids this week. The bid opening will be March 20th at 2:00 p.m. here at City Hall. We estimate that construction will commence late April, early May, and should be completed by the end of July. Next project, Scenic Ridge Phase 5. The lift station and Phase 5 will be put in service tomorrow morning, and that completes the public street and utility construction for this phase of that development. And finally, Scenic Ridge Phase 6. AECom is currently reviewing the street and utility plans for Phase 6 of Scenic Ridge. With the completion of the Phase 6 public improvements that would complete the build-out of Scenic Ridge. So that completes my report for this evening. If there are questions, I'll try to answer them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Gunlock? Bob, I'm not seeing any either. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move then to committee reports. We'll begin with the Finance Committee. Mr. McGilvray, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under item 9A1, I'll make a motion to approve payment of the monthly bills in the amount of $570,833.02.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Manley. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you. In the way of explanation, some of the larger items from this month's bills, first one being to the State Trust Fund loan payment. It's our annual payment for that State Trust Fund loan. It's $208,590.50. Second, for our portion of the shared traffic signals for 2013, we have $24,672.30. And lastly, to Mid-State Equipment for a John Deere 3720 utility tractor and loader, $33,547.63. And I would also note that a large portion of these this month's bill payments are for tax refunds, 2013.
Questions or comments for Mr. McGilvray? Just on the tax refunds, and part of the reason that we have those is for those people that, the property owners that escrow, and if there's a change in the property taxes, if their value went down from the prior year, their taxes went down, I should say, usually the escrow company sends the check either to the municipality or it's sent in the name of the municipality and the property owner, and then therefore the city has to refund to those property owners the excess amount. So, questions or comments for the Finance Committee? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve the payment of bills in amount totaling $570,833.02. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvray,
That would be all from Finance. I would move on then to item 9B, if that's all right.
if you would, Mr. McGilvray.
Under Public Works, Sewer and Water Committee, I'll make a motion to approve a professional services agreement with AECom for the 2014 stormwater services in the amount not to exceed $50,100.
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Diaz. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was approved at the Public Works Committee unanimously. The agreement includes the following scope of work, which is from the memorandum that is in your packet, but I'll read it off for the public. The work to be performed is for NR 216 stormwater compliance for stormwater permit administration and dry weather monitoring program. The Silent Street Pond Best Management Practice ID 8 water quality model and permit and preparation of dredging the basin in 2015. That's the Silent Street Basin. A Harriet Park Best Management Practice ID 69 modeling to determine sediment loadings and cleaning frequency of proposed size manholes with sumps. And lastly, the Lincoln Street Channel Extension Design and Permitting. This project will include channel design, permitting, survey, meetings, and bid support. Project limits are from the end of the 2013 project to the discharge point on the Badger Mill Creek. I would also note that Mr. Reeder could certainly answer any of the questions better than I could on this. He did a very good job, as well as Mr. Gunlock, giving us description of the project at the committee level.
You've heard the explanation, the background. As Mr. McGilvray indicated, Mr. Reeder and Mr. Gunlock would be able to answer questions as well. Are there any questions, comments regarding the motion? Seeing none, the motion before you is to approve that professional services agreement with AECom for 2014 stormwater services in an amount not to exceed $50,100. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Mr. McGilvray, is there anything else in Public Works, Sewer and Water?
I would make a note that at Public Works tonight, we did take up the discussion about domestic partner benefits and equal benefits, actually, as provided by contractors that may work for us. There was no action taken at the committee level, but committee felt it was appropriate under Mr. Burns' recommendation that this move forward to finance, so we'll be taking up at finance on March 10th.
Thank you.
Yep.
Seeing no other business there from Public Works, Sewer, and Water, we'll move to new business. We have discussion and possible action regarding a proposal to establish fees for urban service area amendments submitted to the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission. I'm going to have Mr. Burns provide some background, and then we also have Forbes McIntosh, who is in charge of the government affairs area for the Dane County Cities and Villages. Forbes is with us this evening, and will be able to walk us through some things as well. So, Mr. Burns, if you would, please.
Yes, just to provide a brief introduction, there has been an issue of the level of funding in CARPC, or the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission's budget, for several years now, with the amount being appropriated on an annual basis, not covering expenses outside of grants or other revenues, and drawing down a fund balance. The issue that is coming to a head this year is the issue of the inclusion of fees for urban service area amendments. There was an item included in the CARPC budget this year for those fees. However, at this point, there is not a specific proposal or item that has been implemented. And this is something that the Budget and Personnel Panel that oversees CARPC is going to be discussing at a future meeting. The Dane County Cities and Villages Association has a membership position on the Budget and Personnel Panel. It is Mayor Hokemer as president of DCCVA, and the association has not taken a position on fees, so the association is seeking input from all of the member municipalities on this issue of fees, on first of all whether or not there should be a fees established for urban service area amendment applications, and second, if those fees are established, what types of provisions or criteria should be placed on a fee proposal. This evening we have Forbes McIntosh, lobbyist and staff person for Dane County Cities and Villages Association, here to provide some additional background on this item and answer questions. And we also have, in addition to the two-page item that was included in the packet, there was a longer, I believe, 8-page memo that provides more detail on this that was emailed out today. I do have a few hard copies of that. If anyone would like a hard copy, we can pass those around as well. Does anyone?
I'll have one as long as you have one. Sure. Anyone else? You ready for Forbes then?
Yeah.
Forbes, if you would, maybe walk us through a little bit more of the background and where we're at today, please. If the green light is on there, the mic is still on.
There we go.
There you go. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Forbes McIntosh. I'm the lobbyist for the Dane County Cities and Villages Association. I was asked here by your city administrator and by the mayor to come in, and I'm doing this with other municipalities as well, just to try to answer any questions. The issue of CARPC has been a controversial one for many municipalities and folks having different opinions on its status. I'm here as its lobbyist to try to figure out, based on the membership, what to do when it comes to CARPC fees. I should let you know only one community so far has come out and said their position. That's the Village of DeForest. They've actually come out opposed to any fees at this time. The City of Madison is also working on its position on the issue. I'll be meeting with the mayor's office this week to go over it. I kind of wrote a long document to try to answer as many questions as I possibly could, but to also give you some background on what's going on with CARPC. The Budget Personnel Panel has been discussing the issue of fees basically since CARPC was recreated in 2007. A formal proposal was brought forward by CARPC staff in 2011, and the Dane County Cities and Villages Association was unable to take a position at that time. They wanted to have it up for more discussion. The reason the Cities and Villages Association hasn't taken a position per se is I think the membership has said at its meetings, when it comes to funding through fees, or if it comes through reform of the organization or modifications, they don't want to do it piecemeal. They would rather do it all at one time, so that if you're going to renegotiate a regional planning commission, that it's all done at one proposal and not piecemeal, because we feel that or some of the folks felt as though we'd be losing leverage when it comes to the discussion, because CARPC, of course, deals with land use planning in the Dane County region. Because CARPC, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, is just a one-county regional planning commission, and it's the only one-county regional planning commission in the state. When it comes to funding, the vast majority comes from the county because it serves the entire county, or it benefits the entire county, city, village, and town. 94% of its funding in 2012 came from the county levy. So that's kind of where we're at. It's not funded appropriately, in my opinion, and actually it's not funded adequately to pay for an executive director, and I believe its staff are currently at 90% of time because it doesn't have enough funding. So whether that funding is made up through fees or whether it's made up from increasing the property tax levy amount on the county side, that's basically the only alternatives they have at the moment, unless they do contractual obligations with other municipalities. A question's often thrown at me about why aren't other counties jumping in this. That issue has been around since longer than I have. Even during the original Dane County Regional Planning Commission, other counties did not want to get involved with Dane County. So we've always been a one member or one county regional planning commission because the surrounding counties don't feel as though they can get an equal footing, and probably various other reasons. So it's always been just a Dane County area regional planning commission. That's just a brief overview, but I suspect it might be easier if I just open it up to questions and see if I can try to answer anything that might help make you a decision.
We'll do that. Forbes, I did want to say, though, that when you talk about the Regional Planning Commission here, we are the only one, the single county entity. There are a total of 9 regional planning commissions throughout the state of Wisconsin. So we're the single one. There's 8 other ones. And in each one of those, it's no different, only that because here it's a single county, it's on Dane County's levy, but it's on the same levies for those other, whatever it is, 65 or 66 counties total that are in regional planning commissions. It's all on the county levy.
And
It's just if in the ones where they're like Northwest Regional Planning Commission, for example, is 10 counties. Each one of those 10 counties have funding and it's on their levy and it goes to the Regional Planning Commission. So it's not unique to Dane County that it's on the county levy. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and the original Dane County Regional Planning Commission actually was more than just Regional Planning Commission. It also had the MPO as part of it. So there were federal dollars coming in for the planning as well. So it wasn't just land use planning, it was also land use and looking at transportation. When it was dissolved, the MPO was split from the Regional Planning Commission. The Regional Planning Commission was kind of put on hiatus, and it still did contractual work for the DNR when it came to regional planning, but the DNR made the decision. But the MPO was spun off and became its own entity, which the Dane County Cities and Villages Association, the Dane County Towns Association, Madison, and others have representatives on there, but it tends to be more representatives by the city of Madison than it is the other communities. But that also became kind of a difficulty because that brought a lot more funding to the organization prior to its dissolution.
So we'll open up for questions or comments. Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for that information, Forbes, and thanks for coming here tonight to get some feedback from the city of Verona. We've had some unique experiences with CARPC here in Verona, although I don't think what we've experienced is necessarily unique in Dane County. I know Mazo-Maney's had some difficulties as well, and the concern that I have with the proposed fee increase is that I don't see anything going along with the request for fees that would address any of the problems that I've seen, and I think we as a city have seen with respect to the urban service area approval process or review process. You know, I'm not against the idea of paying fees in conjunction with these types of approvals, but I am opposed to just giving fees to a body like CARPSI that I think is dysfunctional and that is not providing a terribly good service for the communities that forward urban service area reviews for its consideration. If the city was going to participate in any kind of a fee arrangement, or if municipalities in Dane County were going to participate in any kind of fee arrangement, rather than spending a whole lot of time with CARPSI and the denials and all of the troubles and tribulations that we've had over the years, I'd rather just pay to fund a position at the Department of Natural Resources, who ultimately has this obligation anyway, as a matter of law. CARPSI is just an advisory body, so we've spent years getting or not getting, an advisory opinion forwarded along to the DNR. I don't think it's a very effective model for urban service area amendment reviews in Dane County. I think if we're going to pay fees for anything, let's pay for some fees to fund either a full-time or a half-time position at the DNR to a person whose dedicated job responsibility is just reviewing urban service area amendments in Dane County to see if they can comply with the state's environmental standards. And I think that we would have a much more efficient and effective and timely review of urban service area amendments in Dane County under that type of scenario, and therefore I would be willing to invest fees in that type of an arrangement. But absent that, I just don't feel that we would be doing a service to the community in Verona if we just kept throwing money at a dysfunctional organization that frankly I think is politicized, which is why we've been experiencing some of the problems that we had getting approvals through that body, despite the DNR and third parties describing our projects as examples of how you do something right. So that's where that's my position on the issue.
Other comments or questions, Mr. Diaz?
Thank you. I just had a couple quick questions. One is, what are the potential benefits or detriments to the city of Verona specifically if the fee goes forward? And then the second one is, under my understanding of the proposal, a developer wouldn't pay the fee unless a project was approved. Would that create kind of like a incentive to just approve development, because otherwise people don't get paid?
The 2011 proposal actually had it was proposed that the fee would be paid by the municipality, which then, if the municipality changes ordinances, could have the developer pay, and that would be the likely scenario that the developer would pay. There would need to probably be some provisions to ensure that would occur. I know that there's concern by some that if the fee gets too large or is more than what it actually costs to process, then it becomes a disincentive to do parcels of land on a large basis. And usually in planning you want to do larger areas instead of smaller areas, but it might create a disincentive to do it on a larger aspect. You'd be paying by per acre. But the proposal, there is no proposal per se for what's before the Budget Personnel Panel next week. All there is a line item in the 2014 budget that says $50,000 from user fees. There was a 2011 proposal, but that proposal hasn't gone anywhere. So next week, the Budget Personnel Panel is frankly going to be having a discussion from scratch. Whether it's the cities and villages, whether it's the county executive's office, or whether it's the Towns Association, a proposal or a number of proposals may come forward. But right now, CARPSI hasn't brought anything forward. They're just basically lofting the ball to the Budget Personnel Panel, saying we put 50,000 in our budget from fees. You have to decide if we're going to charge fees, and if we're not, how are we going to make up that 50,000 if we're going to make up that 50,000? And the likely scenario that is they'd either make up the 50,000 by reducing their reserves by 50,000, which in the write-up that I did, it shows you that in most years, because there's been inadequate funding, CARPC's been forced to spend its reserves. And I believe they've spent it down to the point over the last 7 years that in mid-2015 they'll actually have a negative cash flow, and that will become a problem. And then they'll have to decide whether they keep on doing the future urban development areas, FUDA, and other programs. They're only contractually obligated to do the USAs. The other planning is good for the area, but they're not contractually obligated by the DNR. I hope that answered it.
And just a further response to Mr. Diaz, John St. Peter, who's the legal counsel for CARPC, he has opined that the fees cannot be conditional upon approval. So if there is an application and that application fails, the fees would still have to be paid. So there's been some discussion about that. There may be games played there as well, but I think that there could be some precautions built into that. But the fees cannot be contingent upon approval. Ms. Doyle?
And I can see the benefit of having the fees be paid regardless of approval, because it really encourages developers to make sure that they're putting a realistic plan forward that should warrant approval. My question is, with these 8 other regional planning commissions, now it might be different because there's more counties involved, but do any of them have user fees or any fees associated?
I believe so. I know it's been said in past discussions that they actually do charge fees, but I've not broken it down, but I could.
Okay.
It shouldn't be too difficult because the regional planning commissions do have a statewide association that I could contact and get that information to you.
Yeah, might be helpful to
This is the only RPC, though, that does water quality issues only. So, for example, the 10-county Northwest Regional Planning Commission, they own businesses. They do economic development, they own businesses, they contract, they do HR for some counties, they do all types of, county administration, other types of things. So we're a very, very different entity than any one of the other 8.
We're a different entity, and we're also, in other communities, the communities come together trying to do regional planning because they want to come together and work together towards planning. I would say, in my experience working for the cities and villages thus far, what you have here is you have a different stakeholders that really don't want to work together. They have their different ideas of what land use planning should occur in Dane County. And because there's not an agreement coming forward first as to what our goal will be, we constantly have friction. And I'm not going to pick on any one entity or one stakeholder, but the Dane County Cities and Villages position on home rule versus the county should be looking at those decisions, versus the Towns Association that is battling with annexation issues and trying to do their own growth plans. They're all bumping heads, and they're not coming together. And right now you have a regional planning commission that's somewhat crippled by the fact that everyone wants to try to control the game. And that's, I wish we could have regional planning done at the local level by CARPC, because those fights need to occur, but maybe having it at the DNR might make sense as well. But for right now, the Dane County Cities and Villages Association have instructed us to try to do our planning at a local level and a regional level. But the difficulty has been trying to find harmony among the different stakeholders between the appointing authorities.
I know Mr. Manley has his hand up, but I want to make sure that Ms. Doyle, if you have...
Just one more quick thing. I know in the previous proposal for fees, there was a $110 figure noted, and I believe that was actually a mean, which is noted kind of in these provisions that could be distorted by outliers. Is there an idea of what the more current median amount might be, or is that?
We don't know. I can ask the regional planning staff what they think that would be. It really depends on how many applications move forward. When the 2011 discussion, we had just really hit the mark of a lot less applications coming forward. That's part of the problem. From year to year, you may have 8, 10, 12, 16 applications, and then at other times you may have only 1 or 2. It really depends on how the economy and the growth. But the one thing is, Dane County is the fastest growing county in this state, and probably will be for a while, because, well, economic development is an issue. So you'll probably be seeing more proposals moving forward, and as you're already reading in the press today, you see it controversial, no matter what community brings something forward.
Mr. Manley first, and then Mr. McGilvray.
Thank you. And I guess, Forbes, you sort of articulated some of the different views of growth and development between cities and villages and towns and counties. And what I think is unfortunate about the discussion we're having right now is that all of those different philosophies shouldn't come into play in the urban service area extension process, because the urban service area review process should be about whether or not a project can meet water quality standards and whether or not something is a good growth plan or not, or meets somebody's philosophy of development is a complete side issue. And I think that's part of the problem with CARPC, is that there's too many people on that board that think that they are the, sort of the master planners of Dane County from a land use standpoint, instead of being focused on what their job is, which is reviewing and making recommendations about whether or not an urban service area amendment can meet water quality standards. And so I think you articulated it correctly when you talked about the different opinions on growth and development, but I don't think those disagreements should come into play at all during the urban service area amendment review process. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, because we've talked about fees and developers and projects, developers don't apply for urban service area amendments, municipalities do. And a lot of times municipalities, including the city of Verona, ask for areas to be added to our urban service area even when there isn't a developer with a project in place. A good example would be our Southwest urban service area amendment, where although Dean Clinic owns some land that's in that area, we applied, 5 or 6 years ago or whatever. We finally got an approval, I think 4 or 5 years later, and we still don't have any development there. That's sometimes urban service area amendments are driven by a very specific development, but in other instances there aren't. And I think it's important to understand that if there's going to be fees assessed to anybody, it's going to be to a municipality that's seeking an amendment, it seems to me. And it's not even clear from the line item that you reference in this memo that there will be fees passed along to communities, but if there were, they would flow directly, to my thinking, to cities and villages. Doesn't mean that cities and villages can't pass those fees along, but I think it's important, if we're thinking about these as, oh, there's going to be a development to offset the fee. That's just not necessarily the case. So I think we should be very careful about whether or not we think fees are a good idea, how those fees would be paid, and who it actually makes sense to pay fees to and for what.
I think if I could just add to that, Mr. Manley, that was part of the concern that former Mayor Cieslewicz had, is that it could take, in the city of Madison, perhaps it could take 20 years for a complete development to fill out. So then the city of Madison would have to cover those costs until such time as the development was fully completed. Mr. McGilvray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wondering, you alluded a little bit to the problems that created by multiple entities trying to control the game, and I think Mr. Manley alluded correctly that there's some dysfunctionality that occurs at CARPC for various reasons, and I think a lot of that's political. I'm wondering if this fee structure, do you anticipate any kind of fee structure, this or another, that this fee structure would give them, CARPC, an ability to be a bit more independent of that kind of influence? Or do you, I'm hesitant to say yes to a fee structure that enables a body to continue on being politically driven by forces that aren't necessarily in the interest of the city of Verona. So,
Here's my professional opinion, no. The way CARPC is set up right now, it's political. And we've tried to get away from that. We had hoped that the resolutions that all the communities passed in 2006 and 2007 would have led to a body. The staff is very scientific, very data driven, but the commissioners themselves, as the Village of Mason-Maney decision and the City of Verona decision depicted, those decisions actually, I would say, helped a lot because the regional planning commissioners, a number of them finally realized what the limits of their power were, because at the time, both Mason-Maney and Verona, they were denied based on items not covered in NR 121, which is required under state law. Oddly enough, on the Verona, as you probably are well aware of, they failed, but still with a majority of the members, or commissioners, voting for it. Personally, I think with the fees, this is $50,000. It's not going to get us an executive director. CARPC hasn't had one since it started. It had one under the old Regional Planning Commission, but that person, Mike King, resigned right before CARPC went online. The Regional Planning Commission tried twice to send names of 3 representatives, which they're required under the resolution to do, and the Budget Personnel Panel failed to act both times. And the funding for that position, which was part of the county levy, that was temporarily removed because they didn't have an executive director. That way the county could have a less of an impact on the levy. But then when it finally came time to hire an executive director, the county is unwilling to put that money back in. So until you get a leader of any organization, especially Regional Planning Commission, on a non-political basis, I don't know how the organization can run efficiently, and $50,000 isn't going to cure that because that $50,000 just fills in its current budget without an executive director. And there's been plenty of discussions how we get there, from dissolving the Regional Planning Commission and re-establishing it, dissolving it and letting the DNR take it over since they're the ultimate body. There's been others that have wanted to dissolve it and recreate it with the Budget Personnel Panel being the 4 people approving and denying regional planning. But regional planning, whether we like it or not, is a very political beast in Dane County and probably always will be. But we do have to figure out a way to get back to just science and data-driven results. And I think NR 121 does a lot of that, but we still have a ways to get there. But in short, I don't see the $50,000 fixing it. All it does is it helps CARPC not spend their reserves that much quicker. But they've been from $109,000 spending of reserves in 1 year to last year $3,000. There's been some ups and downs in the amount of funding. This won't fix it. This is just going to basically put a finger in the dike to stop the financial bleeding, or slow it, I should say. I won't say it will stop it, because in mid-2015, we come to a head as to what do we do. And it's going to either have to be significant staff cuts and significant reduction in its work plan.
And how is the reserves funded? How was the original reserve set up and funded?
They were reserves that were created under the original Dane County Regional Planning Commission and were carried forward. They had been there since the previous Regional Planning Commission. but they've been spending through them because they have not been able to get a budget passed that provides the county levy and/or fees to cover all of their costs.
Well, I guess the one thing I would say is I'm certainly aware and want to have a body in place that looks at water quality. And I don't think anybody here who lives in Verona is going to say that they're not in favor of supporting that notion. The problem is that this body doesn't seem to be able to recognize that that's its mission. It knows it's that, but it wants to do so much more. And I have a hard time supporting that thought process. If they could just focus on that, I could probably support a fee structure, but until somebody can tell me why I would support a body that doesn't function with additional funding, it's hard for me to say yes to.
And I wish I could say that it would. I think the Regional Planning Commission here in Dane County has done a lot of good because this, mainly due to its staff, they've been able to work with developers to go over and above what state law requires, which is good things. But the problem is when staff have recommended approval of a project, i.e. Mazomanie and Verona, the commissioners have gone away from the staff recommendations. Right now it seems to be running a little more smoothly, but I can't guarantee that will continue.
And I know you're absolutely right with staffing. I've always heard that. Our previous planner had nothing but great things to say about the staff that he worked there. Adam, I don't know what kind of interactions you've had there, but you alluded to it. I mean, the city of Verona came back and not only met the requirement for water quality, but we exceeded it. And consequently, Dane County adopted that as their new standard, which is fine, and the city of Verona is proud that we were part of that process. But again, that was even though we exceeded what the requirement was, they weren't able to get their political mind around the reality of what we were offering. So I guess my input then it would be, if you can come back and tell me that there's been a major mind shift, that would be great, and then we could move forward on fee structures.
Mr. Diaz?
Yeah, I'm tentatively in favor of the fee just because I think the work that CARPC does with any potential issues that it has is okay. I just wish there was a way to see it pass directly onto the developers, because what I would worry about is a situation where a city wouldn't plan until a developer came forward, and that way you don't get good long-term planning because people do it in response to a very specific project as opposed to like, how do we design well? And so I guess, like I said, very, very tentative support, but I think the body's important and worth paying for.
Mr. Yours?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, you spoke briefly that this $50,000 isn't going to be able to pay for an executive director. How much more, excuse me, how much more do you think it would take to get to that executive director position so that we can bring maybe some stronger leadership?
About 150,000, I believe. At least that's what the number that's been brought up in the past. I mean, that isn't to say that the salary and the benefits will be that much. It likely will, but I think 150,000 is a number that's been brought up from time to time.
Mr. Manley?
I think that from my perspective, any organization that I've been involved in, if you don't have leadership, you have very little organization. So although I think having an executive director would probably help, I think a lot of the problems that we've experienced with CARPC and a lot of the challenges that remain are not staff driven. I mean, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have an executive director, but unless you change the governance structure of that organization and some of the bylaws, including the goofy bylaw that you have to have a supermajority to get an approval, I just don't think throwing more money at this organization relieves any of the fundamental problems underlying it, and because I think there's structural problems.
And I think most of the Dane County cities and villages, the feedback that I've gotten just on the reform of it, I think many would agree that there needs to be a change with how the governance structure of the Regional Planning Commission is set up. the issue that comes into the other side of the coin is funding it. And if, whether it's required upon Dane County to then fund it for an organization, they may or may not have the same level of governance, is they can always challenge the decisions. So part of the problem is, I think a lot of the Dane County cities and villages would like the municipalities to have a bigger influence upon that organization, because it does do it regulates basically them, the cities and villages, and how they grow. This doesn't impact towns. It focuses on USAs of just cities and villages, although it does other planning activities which have done a lot of benefit, which include bringing in the towns. But that is the part of the coin. We can either dissolve it and recreate it, or seek legislation to change the governance structure. But the issue keeps on coming back to, if that happens, who funds it and how is it funded? And that's the side of the coin that's been the most difficult in trying to achieve some kind of balance. And just so you understand, when it comes to creating a regional planning commission, it just takes a simple majority of the municipality, or I'm sorry, simple majority of the municipalities based on population and equalized value. So it only takes a few municipalities with the city of Madison to recreate a regional planning commission. To dissolve it, though, it only takes a simple majority. Each city, village, town, and county each get one vote. And as in the past, we found the Dane County towns, which number 34, they only needed 31 towns to dissolve it, and all 34 went in last time. So the balance test has always been, if it's recreated, the towns could easily dissolve it with all you need is 31 towns and 1 county vote. And that's always been the difficulty of trying to reorganize it from a dissolution and then recreating it, is because finding that balance between the different entities.
If I could just follow up, because you kind of alluded to, Forbes, in your response, the question of, okay, but who's going to pay for it?
Correct.
And I think that it kind of takes me back to my original statement, which is CARPC doesn't make the decisions about urban service areas. They make a recommendation to the DNR. It's ultimately, as a matter of law, the DNR's decision making. And if we're going to get in the business of paying for these decisions or the decision making process, I'm in favor of not paying somebody to advise the DNR on how to make their decision and have a lot of time and inefficient delay built into the process. I'm in favor of just paying for staff at the DNR to review these projects for water quality and see if they meet the DNR's administrative code requirements to ensure that water quality is protected. I don't think it would be efficient if we're going to be paying fees to pay for what I would call a duplicative step in the process.
Understood.
Other questions, comments? Part of the difficulty that I've had with this issue is when I put my hat on as the president of Dane County Cities and Villages, I have to vote whatever the majority of our municipalities want. And we haven't been able to get the municipalities to take a position. So it's very different for me than it is for the mayor of Madison or for the county executive, because they don't have to go to anybody to get permission or authority to make that decision. So it's been a real struggle as we try and bring this issue up. I think one of the most important things that Forbes said when he initiated the conversation is there's been a lot of talk about not doing things piecemeal. And if we agree to fees, and the main reason that we have not agreed to fees in the past is because the city of Madison had some concerns. Now, when was the proposal that Mayor Soglin made? What year was that?
It would have been last July or last May.
Yeah, it was fairly recent. And then he had some conditions on on if the fees went in place, what they could be used for, when they, when they could be charged and so forth. So but again, it's piecemeal. And I agree that currently CARPC is dysfunctional. And when they're supposed to be taking a look at water quality issues only, I've had commissioners tell me when we were looking at that Southwest application that it was in the Dean Clinic owned the land. One of the commissioners said to me, well, Verona doesn't need a clinic. If people in Verona need health care, they should come to the city of Madison. Well, that's ridiculous. Another one of the commissioners said to me, if there's not a train that stops at the front door of the clinic, you'll never get my vote for it. That's ridiculous. That's not water quality type issues. It's going way beyond what their intended authority was. So, that's been a real struggle. So we need to fix some of those things as well. But the fee issue is before us tonight, and it's going to come up again next week at the Budget and Personnel Panel. But as a member sitting on that body, I can't go against the DCCVA, whatever the majority of our municipalities say. And I think, Forbes, you said one municipality, DeForest, has voted against the fees, and some other municipalities may be taking it up this week?
Yeah, I expect I'll probably get about half of the communities to tell me one way or the other where they're at, and I expect half may not say anything. But we'll contact each and every one of them. At the Dane County Cities and Villages Association meeting, it's the chief elected officials that come to vote. But this has been an issue that very few, or I should say only a few, chief elected officials have felt comfortable taking a stance on behalf of their community. Most of them want to go back to their city councils and village boards to get their direction before they vote on it. And that's what I think has been difficulty in getting feedback on this issue one way or the other.
And it's not the first time that we've struggled with this issue. I'm thinking back to the RTAs, the regional transit authorities. DCCVA decided they couldn't come to consensus on that issue, so they took no action on it. And if each municipality, if they wanted to do something independently, they could, but as an association, DCCVA did not take a position. And then the second thing on the fees, one of the things that I proposed a couple years ago when we were talking about this is, since day one, I've been on the president of DCCVA since 2007, and every year they were using reserves, now to the point where they're almost gone and they'll be operating in the red. Our reserves will be in red. There'll be cash flow issues. Is that a portion of the fees would go back to build the reserve back up? That was one of my thoughts when we talked about this before. But Mr. Manley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if in order to make sure that this has been a good use of your time, Forbes, as you're trying to take the pulse of various municipalities in the Dane County Cities and Villages Association, would it be helpful if we made a formal expression this evening of where the city of Verona stands on the question of whether or not we support fees?
I will leave that to all of your discretion. The more feedback that I get officially is very helpful, but on issues like this, I spend a lot of my time talking to municipalities trying to figure out what a consensus direction it is. As the mayor pointed out, like on the RTA, the Cities and Villages Association was split on the issue, but the one thing they could agree on is they directed me to make sure that if an RTA moves forward, that the Cities and Villages Association got as many appointees as the county in setting up that body if it moved forward, and it did, and we did. So a lot of times, even if we're split, if enough communities give me direction as to if things start moving forward, because the Budget Personnel Panel is made up of 4 individuals, and if 3 decide to go in one direction, I'm going to make sure that that my representative, which is the mayor, if it's going in a direction, then we have to make sure that we're, frankly, filling in the gaps where it might leave some cities and villages in a tough position. But then again, it could come to a 2-2 vote and go absolutely nowhere, and then it spends into the reserves. But if something moves forward, at least the feedback is helping us make sure that maybe we add on provisions to it to ensure that some sort of protection for what the cities and villages want. So I know I'm not answering your question directly. Yes, I'd like to have official action, but even if I don't, this kind of discussion is very helpful as well.
Well, I think we belong to the Dane County Cities and Villages Association because we think it's important to have representation, and I think that Forbes is our voice. And I think it would be helpful if we could give him some guidance on this issue. I think it's an important issue, and I guess I'm inclined to. I mean, I think you're probably pretty clear of where I stand. I don't think I've been ambiguous, but I mean, if anyone else on the council thinks, I mean, I'd be willing to make a motion to oppose a fee increase, especially given that at this point I don't believe paying additional fees to CARPC without governance and bylaw changes, I don't think it advances the ball at all from the standpoint of getting fair or timely recommendations out of that body. And so I can't support investing taxpayer revenue in the city of Verona in an institution that is dysfunctional at the moment with no apparent plan to address the underlying problems.
Comments, questions? Scott, I'm not sure if that was a motion or not. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so.
I was kind of waiting for just.
Yeah, I guess I'll make it a motion. I move that we.
So, Mr. Manley, would you restate your motion then, just so that we're clear?
I move that the city of Verona oppose any fee increase or the payment of any fees to the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Discussion on the motion. Oppose the payment of any fees. So I heard Mr. Diaz.
I would like to speak against this motion. I think, like I said before, I think the work that CARPC does is well worth it. I do think there are some problems with the organization, but I don't think deep sixing it is the right course to take. And I guess I would at least like to see what a proposal would look like. I realize that kind of puts us behind schedule, but if there could be some way that it could be ensured that the cost would be passed on quickly to developers, I'd be more than happy to support a fee increase.
Mr. Yurs?
So I mean, if we do oppose the fees and the fees aren't put into play, that does not necessarily dissolve CARPC, correct?
No. If the fees are not approved, then the discussion will go, let's say the budget personnel panel is either 3-1 or 2-2 on fees, so fees don't move forward. Then a vote will likely have to occur on how they fill that. Either A, they have to do it within their own funds, come up with $50,000 worth of cuts within the organization, or figure out another way to come up with the $50,000. I'm pretty sure I know where the county executive and where the towns association would be. They're gonna push for that it be taken out of their existing funds, so they figure out a way to come up with $50,000 within their own area. And I think they would push for that it not come out of their reserves, but that's going to, having a 4-person board, 2-2 votes means nothing moves forward. So I'm not sure where it's going to fall. It's either going to be $50,000 coming out of the reserves, or it's going to be $50,000 within cuts within the organization. That's going to be up to the BPP, and if the BPP is still 2-2 and everything, I think it's going to end up going to CARPC to make that final determination.
And in addition, if I could just, and the reserves are just about gone. I want to keep reminding people of that. They can't keep going to the trough, to the reserves, because they are just about gone. And like we are here, and most local units of government, the majority of our costs are personnel costs. And CARPC already has lost a lot of really good staff because they're at 90% already. And if you're looking at where the cuts are going to be, more than likely they're going to have to be in personnel. And we're already losing good, skilled, experienced staff at CARPC. So it's a problem. It's a problem. Who had their hand up? Mr. Yurs.
And that's kind of getting to my point. I think if we continue to force the budget issues at CARPC, I don't see how that helps the situation we're in. I do see that the potential fees has the possibility to help the current situation. I know Forbes said that it's not going to necessarily bring a full executive director, but I've also heard tonight that the staff does great work. And do we want to continue to lose that staff, like the mayor said, and have it become more dysfunctional? I don't necessarily think that's a move we want to make either. And so I think at this point, I'm with Mr. Diaz and giving the fees a tentative support.
Other questions, comments? Mr. Manley?
Yeah, I just want to make it real clear so that there isn't any confusion. Right now, we don't get very good customer service out of CARPC. It takes years to get approvals. We have inappropriate comments like the one the mayor talked about. You've got a body that is trying to assert its will over the city of Verona in terms of how our city grows and what growth should look like in the city, which is the job we all were elected to do, not people appointed who are unelected, appointed to CARPC, that is. But, for all of its faults and problems, at least our taxpayers don't have a liability. And what I'm hearing tonight from Alderman Yurs and Alderman Diaz so far is we'd like to take potentially Verona taxpayer money and pay for that kind of crummy service and reward the bad behavior that's going on at CARPC right now and take money out of our city's treasury and pay for that. And I think that's really a bad idea. And I know that Mr. Diaz has said, gosh, I really want to stick it to developers and make sure they pay for it. But, guess what? There aren't developers, or at least there aren't developers that are always just sitting there. I mean, right now, look at the Southwest area. There is no developer with a project right now that we could recoup. If we were required to pay fees on a per acre basis or whatever the case may be to pursue that piece of extension to our urban service area, there's to this day nobody who we could charge fees against. And I just think it's really short-sighted for anybody sitting around the horseshoe here to say, look, we've had a bad shakeout at CARPC. They've taken inappropriate analysis to our projects. They've delayed our projects for years. We've had to fight them in court. We've literally had to get a judge to order them to do their job. And let's give them our tax money. I mean, that just makes no sense.
Mr. Yurs, then Mr. Diaz.
I guess first I'd like to say I really don't appreciate having words put in my mouth, Mr. Manley, because that's not what I said, that I want to reward bad service. What I said was that we have the opportunity to possibly make it better. And I know you're against the proposal, and that's fine. You have that right. But I think just continually letting the budget problems persist, that doesn't help the situation either. and we do have remedies so that, to use your words, that CARPC cannot impose its will. And we've used those remedies before in the past. And so I guess I would like to keep this a healthy debate and not put words in each other's mouths or personal attacks. I don't think that helps any situation.
Mr. Diaz?
A couple things. One, I'd like to ask that this is a roll call vote. And then I guess two other points. One, I don't want to stick anything to developers. I think, though, if they're using government services, that it's only fair to ask them to pay for it. And I guess I would also like to say that people in the city pay county taxes, and I don't think if the money comes from the county or from some other government body, it's all coming from taxes, and I don't think people are going to really care for, like, well, you paid it through the county and not through us, so then it doesn't matter, it doesn't count against us. I mean, taxes are taxes, and so I don't think that's the best way to look at it. I think the best way to look at it is whether this kind of planning, even with its faults, focusing on water quality, is worth doing or not. And frankly, I'd rather have it done locally than through the DNR. It's easier for them to be more responsible to citizens' complaints. It's easier for people to testify. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start with the DNR. So, like I said, I remain opposed to this resolution.
Mr. McGilvery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll preface this by saying I'm not against what CARPC and staff does for the water quality issues for Mr. Diaz. I think you make a great point that they are doing good work when they focus on that water quality. It isn't the staff that we're having an issue with, and this isn't about punishing staff, Mr. Ewers. This is about the commission that is actually in charge of implementing what the staff brings forward, and that's where I have the issue. And I think while Mr. Manley may have offended you, what he's trying to say is that we are enabling that continued misrepresentation of staff. That's how I look at it, because the commission should be taking that information and using it to make educated decisions instead of applying their political agenda, and that's what I have an issue with. You made reference to the fact that there are remedies that we can pursue, and I can tell you I was here when we went through it, and it was not without cost, and it was not without significant cost. I think the one study that we were required to do was $96,000?
I think we spent a total of about $125,000.
Yeah, so yes, there are remedies, but to Mr. Manley's point, I mean, you are committing yourself to continued abuse by someone who really shouldn't have the authority to do that to you, and requiring you to spend money, while not tax money per se, Dane County adjusting a budget or us adjusting some kind of money. It's money that we could be using for other things, that $120,000. So I would be in support of the motion based upon what Mr. Manley initially said, which until you get those structural problems taken care of, I have a problem with the body in general.
Mr. Yers?
No, and I appreciate your argument, and I understand where you're coming from. I just feel that even if we do oppose these fees, we're still going to have the same CARPC body working that we currently do. And if we do not find ways to allow them to have funding, we're going to lose the good parts that we've all agree on of the staff. I mean, that's where these budget cuts are going to hurt the most. And so I'm trying to preserve the parts of CARPC that protect Verona residents, and with the possibility of also bringing more leadership to that organization, which could begin to possibly fix, which I think all of us agree that there are problems with it as well, and that hopefully this new leadership can work to solve those problems.
Go ahead, Mr. McGilvery.
Just one more thing, and Mr. McIntosh, maybe you could correct me or help me out a little bit here, but it was my understanding the initial DNR kind of charged CARPC with the water quality issues.
The way regional planning commissions are set up, the regional planning commissions contract with the Department of Natural Resources for under NR 121, which is water quality. In this area, there's a special water quality designation. So that's part of it. But part of the contractual obligation as an agency is to provide advice and to the DNR on how USA should be approved. It's not the only thing they do, but it's the primary thing they do under the Regional Planning Commission here in Dane County.
So just to follow up to that, I wonder if you could maybe highlight if the DNR, obviously DNR has recognized that there is an issue with the way CARPC functions because they overruled what CARPC's initial Verona decision was and came back and said, no, you can't do that. You have to revisit this and apply the standards that are in place. Is that correct?
It sent a memo. The memo was actually, I'm trying to remember the year, it was actually before the previous administration, but then was delivered, I think in January or February when the new administration came in. But what it did is it expounded the limitations and what a USA can be denied upon, and it also went into great detail on its powers and duties and what its limitations are. And actually that document helped a lot in the cities and villages, at least communicating with the commission in the future, because I think there were some commissioners that thought they could deny on whatever they had wanted. And in fact, in one of the meetings, a town representative had alluded to, do you have a written agreement with the town on your issue? No, but it's not required. Well, I'm going to vote against it. It was comments like that were put into the minutes that got the commission in trouble at the Mazomanie issue. But the letter from both Mazomanie and Verona, it basically focused on what are the powers and duties and limitations of the Regional Planning Commission when it comes to USA approvals and denials.
So, and I guess the point that I would make to you, Mr. Ures, is that, and I recognize that you believe the body, CARPC itself, is there to protect the people of the city of Verona. But my point to you would be that DNR is in place by the state in order to also protect, and they have stepped in and mentioned, or have stepped in and directed CARPC to act in a fashion that represents what they're supposed to do. So I don't think that CARPC, there will be some body in place that's reviewing water quality, and that's what I want to see continue, but not if it's going to result in us being charged more money in order to get the project through, and that's what we're up against right now. I'd like to see us find a way to help CARPC get to a better place so that they can do the work that Mr. Diaz thinks is important, that I think is important, that you think is important.
Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I mean, as somebody who's went through the 5-year ordeal that was the Southwest area urban service area amendment, it's a little bit difficult to sit here and listen to people talk about all of the great work that's done and how we've got to give them more of our tax money to help them do all of this great work. And it's particularly frustrating to think about people in this body who were elected by voters in the city of Verona to make planning decisions for our community, to talk about giving our tax money to an organization that isn't even bashful about the fact that they want to be that unelected board who is not accountable to the people who voted for all of us. They don't even try and hide the fact that they want to be the ones who make land use decisions that affect how we grow as a city. And we have people sitting in this chamber who want to bless that kind of what I would call bad behavior. I'm sorry if that offends you, Mr. Ures, but I think it is, with our tax dollars. I just think that's, if any of us take seriously our obligation to be good stewards of the city of Verona taxpayers' money, we will not send money to this organization, period. I think it's that simple.
Mr. Diaz?
In addition to being responsible with taxpayer money, I also think it's really important to be a good steward of the environment. And with all the problems that I've heard from CARPC, they still are a good frontline defense for protecting water quality. And frankly, I trust them far more than I trust the DNR to protect water quality.
Ms. Doyle?
I guess my comment is just in regard to other regional planning commissions and associations and whatever forms or names they have. They usually are involved in overseeing the planning of the area for which they encompass. Like you look at Portland, you look at the Twin Cities, you look at different areas throughout the country, and their goals are usually to promote development in both a financially and environmentally stable way and wherever their governance occurs. So I guess my question is, so this is the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, but it's just in regard to handing out the USAs and in dealing with water quality. It's not like a forum for conversations about regional planning and municipalities trying to work together in creating planning.
Well, and partially that's the reason why CARPC is looking at moving ahead with FUDA, the Future Urban Development. I think all of us agree that planning done on a regional basis is better than us doing it one-on-one. But yes, we are very, very different than the other RPCs. The structure, how we vote, how commissioners are appointed, and so forth. So we could go into a whole lengthy conversation about that. Before, I know Forbes wanted to make a comment, but before I forget, I just want to make the point here that the $50,000 that they're talking about, if these fees went in place, first of all, it's going to take a long time for that money to come in, especially the way things are going right now. That $50,000 is not going to save CARPC. It's inevitable unless something changes. There's a chokehold on CARPC right now. And I don't think one of the questions I had for Forbes, and I know you wanted to come up and make a comment, one of the questions I have for you, I don't believe it's the intent of CARPC that if the fees are approved, that they will put their employees from 90% back up to 100 or something greater than 90. So my concern is when I said that, I think that the employee should be at 100%. And I've argued for that all along. I think that's the appropriate thing to do. Number one, I don't believe that the fees are going to bring them up to 100%, and we still have, we're still going to be losing good employees. They have already left. It's not that they're going to. There's employees that already have left. But Forbes, I know you're going to make a comment, but can you respond to if the fees are put in place, do you know, is it the intent of the commission and of CARPC staff that money goes to fund the employees to 100%?
I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I just know that it was part of their budget. It was $50,000 line item. And frankly, I think the line item was put in there to bring the issue of fees to a head at the budget personnel panel. And you had asked about planning. Actually, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission does planning in a lot of different areas, not just FUDA, but we actually had received a HUD grant to do sustainable community development, farmland preservation. There's a lot of different things that it does. And in fact, there's a report that CARPC is right now, it's under peer review, that basically finalized their HUD grant. So the document's finished, but it's going to bring forward a lot of GIS mapping and other stuff for farmland preservation and other issues.
Ms. Doyle?
I was going to say that work did come up at the CARPC conference at Monona Terrace. I believe it was last fall, just was bringing that up for a point of discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think notwithstanding, the idea of future urban development areas and whatever that means, the ultimate planning responsibility lies with individual municipalities, and there was a reason why the legislature a number of years ago passed a smart growth law that said every municipality has to have a comprehensive plan. And the most important part of a comprehensive plan is a community deciding through zoning what land uses are going to be. And because land uses will determine where development occurs and where it doesn't, and what areas you set aside as green space and environmental corridors and the like. And we, as elected officials in the city of Verona and throughout the state, are responsible for enacting those comprehensive plans and making the decisions that we think are best for our community about where to grow, not somebody who is appointed by a politician to an unelected board. And there's too many people on CARPC who don't understand that distinction. And that's a problem. That's a problem if you care about home rule, and it's a problem if you care about Verona being able to plan its own future. And Mr. Diaz, I think it's wonderful that you have so much faith in CARPC to protect the environment, and that's great. We all want environmental protection, but as much faith as you have in CARPC, they don't make the decision. DNR does. And I don't think that it's very efficient to continue to deal with an advisory body that you have to sue in order to get them to do their job. That's really expensive, and as I said, investing taxpayer money in that kind of an arrangement, I think, is not in the best interest of Verona taxpayers.
I don't see any hands. I think the people that wanted to speak had several opportunities to speak. We do have a motion. We do have a second, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of Mr.
Mr. Mayor, could you repeat the motion
Uh,
for the record?
The essence of the motion, just the notes that I had written down is that the city of Verona would oppose the payment of any fees to CARPC. I mean, we may want to strengthen that a little bit, but that's basically, Scott, I think.
I think that's what I said.
Okay.
I hope that's what you said.
So we have a motion and a second, and we have a roll call vote has been requested. Go ahead, Ms. Reiki.
I just thought of a question to ask. I don't know if this is too straightforward or something, but I'm just wondering, is there a possibility that should there not be enough votes to approve the fees and CARPC is ultimately forced to dissolve, could some of the staff people be employed by the DNR? Or, I mean, has that been on the table?
Go ahead, Forbes.
If CARPC were to go away tomorrow, where the staff would go, I have no idea. And I don't see the DNR hiring many people right now because I think they're already staffed to their capacity. So they would have to find jobs wherever they could find them.
Mr. Manley?
Forbes, if you stay up there, because the question is for you. We're talking about a $50,000 line item. Can you tell us what CARPC's overall budget is and what their personnel costs are? So we can put it into perspective, because I think we keep hearing that this $50,000, if they don't get it, CARPC, folds up its tent stakes and it's gone.
Yeah, no, it's not going to go away if it doesn't get to 50,000. Again, what's going to happen is, let's say the budget personnel panel next week doesn't approve fees and no 50,000 is given. The budget personnel panel then is going to have to make one of two decisions: either direct CARPC to find the $50,000 within their budget, which is likely to come from personnel or maybe not doing some programs in its 2014 work plan, or it'll have to spend from its reserves. Those are basically the only two. I don't know the actual number of their overall budget, but I think the levy was at about a little over $800,000. And it's the difficulty is when you look at their overall budget, you look at the HUD money. You can't count the HUD money because a lot of that's just passed through to other agencies. I'd have to look it up real quick, but I think their budget is just under $1 million, but I need to check that to make sure. Is it around?
I think that's about right, yeah.
So would it be fair to say that we're not even talking about 10% of CARPC's budget?
I think that would be fair to say.
Thank you.
A roll call vote has been requested, so I will have Ms. Schofield read the roll, please.
Alderperson Bear,
Aye.
Alderperson Diaz,
No.
Alderperson Doyle,
No.
Alderperson Manley,
Aye.
Alderperson McGilvery,
Aye.
Alderperson Reekie,
Aye.
Alderperson Steiner,
Aye.
Alderperson Yurs,
No.
What do you have, Cammy?
I have
That's what I had too. The vote, it was 5. Okay. So the motion passes on a 5-3 vote. Forbes, thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate it. We have one other item before us this evening. That is the approval of operators' licenses. Ms. Schofield, please.
We have operator licenses from Vicky Meyer at Vincenzo BP, Sarah Salzeder at Wisconsin Brewing Company, and Nicole Bloomer at Gray's Tide House.
You've heard the applicants. What's your pleasure?
Move approval?
We have a motion by Mr. McGilvray. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bear. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approval of the operators' licenses signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carries. Are there any announcements this evening? No announcements this evening, then a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Diaz. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Yurs. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.